In the old part of Kathmandu, there is a small courtyard called Aitambaha. Tourists walk past it every day. Most of them do not know that this quiet courtyard holds one of the strangest stories in Nepal. It is the story of a giant who ate children, who was tricked into leaving the city, and who is still fed a full meal every single year, even today. Hundreds of years later, his name is Gurumapa. The story begins with a man named Keshandra. He was not a hero. He was a gambler, and a bad one. Over time, he lost everything he owned. With nothing left, he moved in with his sister, but the gambling did not stop. One day, he even stole the plate his food was served on just to sell it and gamble again. His sister had enough. To teach him a lesson, she served his next meal directly on the floor with no plate at all. Keshandra was deeply hurt. He wrapped up the rice in a cloth and walked far outside the city into the forest, too proud and too broken to stay. When he finally sat down to eat, he found the rice had gone bad. It was rotten, full of maggots. So he spread it out under the sun to dry, and while he waited, he fell asleep. When he woke up, the rice was gone. Pigeons had eaten every last grain. Watching the empty cloth where his last meal used to be, Keshandra broke down and cried. And this is where the story turns strange. The pigeons, moved by his grief, left droppings on the ground beside him. When he looked closer, the droppings had turned to gold. There was more gold than one man could carry. While he sat there, trying to understand his sudden fortune, something enormous stepped out of the trees. A giant, rotten breath, terrifying face, long fangs. This was Gurumapa, a man-eating creature that lived deep in the forest, and it had followed the smell of a meal. Except the meal it smelled was Keshandra himself. Thinking fast, Keshandra did not run. He called the giant uncle. He flattered him, conned him, and made him an offer. If Gurumapa carried the gold back to his house, Keshandra would feed him a full meal of rice and buffalo meat, and more than that. He would be allowed to take away any child whose parents called on him. Whenever that child misbehaved, Gurumapa agreed. He carried the gold to Aitambaha and moved into the attic of Keshandra's house. For a while, this arrangement worked. Gurumapa was fed. The household was rich. But giants do not stay satisfied for long. Children in the neighborhood began to disappear. Parents had grown used to warning their kids, half joking, that Gurumapa would come for them if they misbehaved. Except it stopped being a joke. According to the oldest versions of this story, Gurumapa did not just threaten children anymore. He began taking them. Some versions of the legend go further and say even Keshandra's own son became one of his victims. The neighborhood turned on the giant they had welcomed in. The people of Aitambaha could not kill him, and they could not simply order him to leave. So they negotiated, the same way Keshandra once had. They promised Gurumapa something he could not refuse, a guaranteed feast every single year, forever, if he agreed to move out of the city and live alone on an open field called Tundikal. Just outside the old city walls, Gurumapa accepted the deal, and he left. Here is the part that turns this from an old bedtime story into something else entirely. That promise was never broken, not once. To this day, the people of Aitambaha still prepare that exact feast, rice and buffalo meat, and carry it out to Tundikal. It happens once a year during the holy Ngo Jatra season, and it is not treated as a performance for tourists. It is run by a specific caste group, the Jiapu farmers of Kiligal, who carry the food on a traditional wooden frame, on foot, without stopping, all the way from Aitambaha to the center of Tundikal. Along the route, a small portion is even set aside for another shrine on the way. Once they arrive, a share of the food is left for Gurumapa. The rest is handed out to the crowd that gathers to watch, a bargain made with a man-eating giant. Centuries ago, is still being honored today, in the middle of a modern capital city, by people who have never seen a giant in their lives. So, what is Gurumapa really? Historians who study newer culture do not read this as a simple monster story. They see it as something closer to a moral lesson wrapped inside a myth. It is a story about greed, about a man who gambled away everything and got a second chance through pure luck, and about a community that had to find a way to control a danger it could not destroy outright. Some scholars point out that the story may explain something real, an old pattern of children going missing in the Kathmandu Valley, wrapped into a legend that gave people a way to make sense of an unexplained fear. We may never know how much of the Gurumapa story is folklore, and how much of it grew out of something that genuinely frightened people in Itambaha long ago. What we do know is this: the feast is real, the root is real, the caste responsible for carrying it is real, and every year, without fail, somewhere in the middle of Kathmandu, a meal is still left out for a giant that, if you ask the people of Itambaha, was never truly destroyed, only persuaded to stay away.